Cosmic here, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to talk about the new card game that Bandai just announced, and it is absolutely not at all what you think it is. Trust me, because I finally get to talk about an old game that I'm really excited for, was Pixel Tactics, and what it was and how that is going to translate to the Sandland card game that was just announced. So we are going to talk about the Sandland game and all the news here very shortly, but I think it's very important for us to cover what was Pixel Tactics and what feels like the very obvious inspiration for this game, and then of course Richard Garfield getting involved as well and what that means for the game. So the thing I do want to note up front is that Pixel Tactics is a much more in-depth and complex game, which also featured league play available out of the box and really just had a much larger ecosystem. However, I would not expect that from Bandai's new game because it is going to be solo IP focused and based a little bit of the knowledge of what we have is going to be locked into just the 10 sets and then be updated as more episodes of the anime and the game itself comes out. So I will say that if you like Pixel Tactics, but it was a little bit too in-depth for you and a little bit too much to grasp at a time, then this could be an awesome introduction into a very fun tactical game that you can play quickly with your friends. So with that out of the way, let's talk about Pixel Tactics really quickly to give you an idea of what we can look forward to in this game. So up first, we have the leaders, and we do know that based on the distributor information, which again we'll cover in just a bit, there are going to be leaders in this game. However, in Pixel Tactics, the way that it worked is that you had every single card that could turn into a leader that all had different customized abilities. Now, some of them were more straightforward, like we do have on the Cadenza that was just like an armor ability, versus the Lenmore, which was going to be the get an extra attack in. And then on the right-hand side there, you could see that depending on where you placed it, so that red bar is the very first row, the green bar is the middle row, and then the blue bar is going to be the back row. So in Pixel Tactics, it was a 3x3 grid that your leader just went in the middle, or the hero. And in Sandland, it is just going to be a 4x2 grid. So 4 up front, 4 in the back, and just have a front line and back line. Kind of exactly like Union Arena. I'm wondering if that's kind of like where the talk and development happens. So the good news is that this is going to be way more straightforward, and based on a bunch of the cards that we're going to talk about at the end, it does seem to be an extremely simplified version. But what I do love, and what I hope that this turns into, is that this could be an ecosystem that they then build off on, much like we see with Union Arena, where it is IP based, and because of the product listing on the distributor pages, it does say just Sandland 01. They could do other IPs, and they could have other games that borrow this system and still have like an IP versus IP game. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, why not just put it into Union Arena? These are very different games. They play out very differently. And also, this is not a TCG. And I think that's really important because Bandai has really only done TCGs and then the arcade games up to this point, which are still technically TCGs because there's deck building and all that stuff. But this does seem to be more in line with just a buy a sealed box, have that experience. And that is what the leader does. Like, there's no real in-depth customization, at least from what we can tell so far, but that could change with future sets or the Sandland set 2 that they are ultimately going to release. So with that, like, very quick overview of the different grids and stuff, let's get into the announcements overall. So the website is up. I'll have a link to the website in the comments, so you can go check that out. And just up front, this was the big surprise, right? Where we have the information, went live, it was on ICV2, and now it's out there. So if you want to check it out, feel free to go out there. Again, we'll go over some of these cards in a little bit, but just a very quick overview through it. About Sandland, has an anime, has a video game coming out in April, which is really exciting. The product, which we're going to dig into a little bit more, it is just the sealed deck style of game where you can get 1 of 10 leaders. And then down here is a quick note from Richard Garfield, as well as the grid, which we're going to come back to and talk about in a little bit from there. The one thing I will note here is that it will be available at Gen Con for early purchase. But again, this is something that you are going to be spending, I assume, $30 to buy a sealed deck, and that's all you need. So if you love sealed, if you love limited, you're probably going to be really excited with this game. If you're someone like me who is more all TCG focused and really likes the super in-depth customization, then this might fall a little bit flat for you. So this is now catering to a different audience that I'm assuming Bandai is going to try to grow into, right? They do a lot with TCGs, but they really don't have a lot on more of the board game style of feel, right? This really lends itself to be a little bit more in that field where instead of buying $100, $150, $200 like Fusion World right now, booster boxes, you're just buying a display of straight MSRP for $30. And if you buy 4 different decks, or 4 different displays, I should say, you will most likely get 4 different decks and 4 different complete play styles. So I think that's really cool. I didn't like what Keyforge did in terms of the complete randomization, which is what, Richard Garfield has really been known for as of late, which again, personally not a big fan of how he's all limited, super random, experience, no 2 decks are the same sort of thing. But that's why I was a little bit worried, but it does seem, because it is based on these leaders, which we'll talk about shortly, it does feel like a more cohesive, streamlined experience, which is really important for getting players to check out the game. So on distributor pages, if you cannot make it to Gen Con, definitely talk to your LGS. They can order this today, because you can see that there's only, of course, 18 days left at the time of recording this, which is not a large pre-order window. And it does release on September 27th. So by going to Gen Con, you get this a full month and a half early, or I guess, what is that, 7 weeks early, which is insane. And then, as I mentioned, it does have the SL01 tag. So what is included in this, right? So what's interesting here is that it does say, the Sandland characters, we saw that, but new card sets will be timed to match the anime plot with speedy releases. So I assume, as best they can, that there is going to be whatever the next arc is, that will be then 5 new decks or 6 new decks. The one thing that I did get a little bit bummed about is that if you look at a display, then how many are in a case? So a display is only 6 decks, but there are 10 total. So you have to then buy, if you're someone who wants to have like that complete box experience, ideally you would want to buy 2 displays and then hope that you get one of each, or the 10 total get 1 unique at minimum and not really double up on too many, because it's going to feel really bad if you get like buy a display and 3 are in the same one, right? The one thing I do wish we saw a little bit differently is like the Grand Blue Arena game that's coming out. If you buy a display, you get every character in that set. So one of the things I really wish we would have seen here, and probably 10 would have been too many, but have some kind of pack where it could have been having 10 in a set that says, hey, this is now, because it becomes more like a living card game at that point, right? Here's a set of 10. You buy this, you get every character, and yeah, sure, it's probably going to be really expensive, because even if it's like, okay, $20, right? That's $200 to have all the decks and have all the experiences, but that is then a one-time purchase and you're done, right? So you don't have to, keep chasing all those alt arts or things of that nature. So hopefully it's better in that regard. Maybe there's going to be more information about this later, but I assume that if you buy 2 displays, knock on wood, it's going to be fine, right? You're going to have 12 total decks. Hopefully they are distributed equally enough that you are likely to hit one of each of the 10 very easily from there on. And, again, it would be really, really nice. Now, the one part is that we can get a couple pieces that's going to all come together at the end. I'll talk about this more at a high level, but devise round-winning strategies by carefully choosing cards from your hand to play or scrap at the start of each round. So in Pixel Tactics, this is played in rounds. You have to deploy things at certain times. So I think we're having a very good idea of how this is actually going to play out. And again, we'll go back to the board and the card costs, and there's some card previews that we're going to talk about. But it does give us a little bit idea of more of a, back and forth, taking different, what we assume are tricks or heroes that get defeated, and then you get points that way. So I couldn't find any point-based system, but it does give us a little bit more details on kind of what we'd expect for this to play out. So the other one is that the unit battles can be used to add effects or mission quests for endless possibilities in your strategies. So this one's interesting because there's also the bluffing aspect. If you put something down in a lane, then do you flip it up? What kind of effect does it have? Oh, is my opponent going to play a ranged unit that I don't want to put in this lane, right? And there's usually a back and forth that alternates between the players of who has to play their thing first. So I am really curious to see more of how this plays out in that exact back and forth. But again, I think this is going to be very similar to Pixel Tactics in that regard. And then, of course, the contents, you get a deck, 30 asset or tactic cards. Assets are just creatures, right? Things that stay on the board. Tactics are one-time use spells, effectively. It does look like you have to play them on the board and then use them, because at least the one preview so far says remove it and then do it. So that's a little weird. That might have to, board space might be more of a problem in this game compared to Pixel Tactics, but we have to wait until we see more of these spoilers. And then it contains 1 deck randomly selected from the 10 deck patterns. So assuming the very literal wording on here, it is just 10 decks, right? The fun part about Keyforge is that there was like a million different combinations. So when you got to constructed, or when you want to have a more standard style of gameplay, it was really hard to put those decks together, where now this does seem a lot more straightforward and just letting players jump into whatever their favorite characters are, right? Then these are the 10 so far. So with that, let's dive back into the spoilers and really go from there. So let's talk about the board, right? So we've talked about this 8 versus 8 assets, or just the 4x2 grid, kind of whatever way you want to put it. So you'll notice that on the cards, and this will be more apparent in the following ones that we talk about, is that there are 3 numbers across the bottom. One's attack, one is cost, one is defense. So there is a memory marker here on the side, similar to Digimon, that I get to play something that's going to have a cost between 2 to 3, and then it goes back to you. Then you play something that has a certain cost, and as soon as it goes back to 1, then I will get the turn back and get to play something else. This is likely going to have a play pattern where it is done in rounds that you draw for your turn. You figure out how much that you're going to play. You're going to count out how many resources you have for that turn, decide which of them gets scrapped, play them one by one, go to the end of the round, and then everything deals damage to it. So the one thing that'll be interesting to see is it damage that takes an action, or is it just at the end of the phase, everything does it at the same time? So on here, we can see, the discard pile, the leaders, which will definitely have unique effects. So I'm really excited to see what this looks like and how much they really build into this. Because again, it is one of the cool things that we saw with Pixel Tactics over time is, yeah, to start, you had very vanilla leaders, right? Like, oh, all your fiends get +2 damage, right? All your mechas get +1 armor, something like that, right? Or we saw later on where it's like, oh, you can manipulate your opponent's board, where you can put a creature that's here and put it to their back row, and then they can't use it until they move it forward. But if they move it forward, it costs like 1 action point or something, right? So there's a lot that they could do with this, but I think just from a very base level, because it doesn't have the every single card can be used 4 ways that Pixel Tactics had, you have a little bit better of a entry point for players that will hopefully have enough depth and customization that can make people interested to play it more than just like the one and done feel to it. So I'm personally really excited to see where this goes. Now, it is called the Sandland Tactical Card Battle. So again, it is something that this will likely be within its own ecosystem where it's only going to be Sandland cards, but this is something that they could very easily expand into other IPs and kind of bring it in as well. Again, this is not a trading card game. Think of it much more as a board game, or again, something that, you just see a new IP got released, you and your buddy pay the $20 entry, like whatever it is, you both get a deck, shuffle it up, play a couple times because you like the IP, and then it just goes on your shelf. Like my Keyforge is still sitting on the shelf because it's a nice, again, more board game style feel that you just pull it out, you look at the deck, say, okay, this is where the deck building idea is from, play it out, and then put it back on the shelf. So I think this will be a very fun game that you and a friend can just do some quick battles with and put it back on the shelf, but we'll have to wait and see where it goes from there. Once again, just showing the product information. Now, this was a little bit different from GTS, and the one thing that I really want to call out here is that it contains common 10 PR cards, 5 types times 2. So this might be more of where it gets an interesting point of, okay, well, are they going to have more like chase rares in it? So if you really want to foil out your one leader in your one deck, maybe they do it that way. So that's a way to get players to buy more of these. But hopefully, the way that it's going to end up working is that you're going to have the various leaders, and then you just build the deck that way, right? It is going to be, hey, this is the fiends that I want to play, or here's the mechas, or here's the human archetype, right? And it just builds itself into that. So a little bit different information that's out there across the different distributor pages, but really looking forward to seeing what this looks like. So getting into it, and this is where we can really start to see some of the breakdown of the cards, right? These are just pulled directly from their website. I did the absolute best I could trying to center these, zero in, and all that good stuff. So what does a card look like, right? So I think up front, very obvious, we have the attack amount and we have the health amount. So we do see that play out a little bit here where it's, 3 damage, 5 health. In Pixel Tactics, the damage stayed on the units until they died. I'm assuming that's going to be the same exact thing here. And then we see a point cost here in the top left corner. Because we know that the memory is going to be the main system for how, and I'm just calling it memory again to use Digimon, because that memory system is going to be how this stuff is played out, right? Like we see the very obvious 2 cost here. Is this the point system, right? How many did you defeat? Is this 2 points that your opponent gets? We don't really know what the victory condition is going to be yet. In Pixel Tactics, it was deal X damage to your opponent's leader, but we couldn't see anything more than just a cost on the leader, which means it's going to be more of a deck building focus and not a protect the commander style of focus, right? So Splash, it's going to deal 1 extra damage deal 1 damage to neighboring targets. So if you put it in that middle grid spot, it would do damage 1 to each side. And then Armor 1, reduce the damage. So what the other part that's really nice about this is you may move before you attack. So again, this lends itself well to you are locked into those grid placements and then will likely take an action to move them or to redeploy, it was called, right, in Pixel Tactics, somewhere else. And then again, as you're moving these cards, they will likely get other effects. So this one is pretty good at a high level, right? The extra splash damage is really nice. It is something that you're going to be able to move when you need to. From what we can tell, this is going to be a melee unit, so it's going to be in that front row of 4. But again, it helps you kind of dodge between the different lanes, and depending on what your opponent sets up, having a splash damage and then moving over, hitting that damage onto that got one damage the previous round, hit it for 3, and then that splash damage goes back again, right? This is a pretty scary card potentially when we see where the rest of the power and toughness and all that stuff lines up. So very curious card. We're gonna have to see where it goes. And then again, the asset is just, it's a unit, it's a creature. Think about it that way. But then we don't know how much the family types or archetypes are going to matter for the name styles. And then again, the point in the top left corner does remain questionable. From there, we have Guppy, the swimmer human. This one does have range, so this is going to be something that is on your back line and can only be hit by other ranged units. Now, they usually have other handicaps or effects that make them a bit more difficult to use if they're ranged, or they won't be as strong, but still very important to use and can be very tactical. So this one in particular, when you reveal it, +2 attack this turn. So this is something that, again, assuming it's going to be like a, hey, we both put something face down for the turn and then reveal at the same time, this is now saying, okay, I'm going to surprise you with this guy now dealing 5 damage with the round end. And with 5 health, it does seem to be a pretty chunky amount from what we've seen so far. So just, again, very early on, seems like a very solid range unit, but we'll have to see how it goes. Now, the other part is if we look at and again, this is just taken straight from the website, did the best that we could. We have Rao, who has the alt art, what I assume is the alt art in the background. So I think this is where that's going to be more of like the, hey, they have some other kind of, or I guess maybe the first one's the alt art and then this is the standard in the background, right? There's going to be some kind of chase aspect to it, at least based on the distributor pages information. So again, how much does that really matter? Like, as long as I get my base rarity key set in that one complete package, I think this could be a very easy home run, and just, I'm totally fine with that. But we'll have to, again, wait and see kind of where it goes from there and what other type of, okay, this is a game that, think of it as a board game that Bandai just puts out there, but then are they going to have any kind of shop support for it? Like, this is one of those games that, like, you just play for alt arts, right? It's not something that really lends itself to a more competitive TCG, but could be better in other ways. So I'm very curious to see also what they do from a support perspective, because there's a lot of different ways that this could ultimately go. And then from there, we do see one of the tactic cards, or again, spells, instance, a one and done sort of thing. But which is interesting is that it does say permanent in this case. So discard to move a creature to any slot, and then heal it by 3. So we got a heal effect. We have a free move effect, because even though it uses a card. So I'm assuming that this is going to play a role. Again, we will likely see some cards that say, hey, if this move this turn, gain X, right? So I think we will see more of like, okay, now this is clearly for a creature type. So now there's going to be a fiend type that we're going to talk about, a mecha type, a creature type, a human type probably, and then the leaders will somehow, interact or play with those. So again, where it placed on the board does matter quite a bit, it turns out. And then here we finally did get to see from this is now a buffer for demons. So we have Beelzebub himself being a fiend. He has armor 1 and then +1 for each demon on your side, right? So now it's like, oh, hey, this guy can get really big and really strong if we just have a bunch of demon cards. So that's something that lends itself very well to now more of this archetype build focus that you want to do, and then probably plays very well into a leader, and is also pretty cheap. If this is just, again, the memory side, it only costs 1. That's very easy to sneak in, right? So we're going to want to see a lot of like 1 and 2 cost cards, because you want to be able to play a card that's going to have some type of impact without pushing it over to your opponent's side that has, like 4 energy that they get to use with. So it's kind of interesting to see how this has evolved for those that know, like, if you go from like Exceed to Digimon and now to this, you can see that same memory system getting played out time and time again. And then one of the couple last ones here that we have is Beelzebub, which just has stealth. So again, something that can only be attacked and then it gets kind of cut off. But so there's also going to be various effects with face down cards. So Is it going to be more of a bluffing thing? Is it going to be something like the range unit that we saw that when revealed for this turn, right? So you don't have to reveal every turn. You just save it and kind of place it there for when you know it's going to have an impact. So that's another area where I think they might have more flexibility in how they design some of the cards, while again being more streamlined overall compared to Pixel Tactics, where again, it was just a lot, unfortunately, that to get people into the game, right? Pixel Tactics was about as unfriendly to new players as you could get, but once you got into it, people really loved it. So as someone who does like the tactics-based games, and assuming, again, this is going to be more LCG focus or living card game focus, where it's a buy the deck, you get the leader you want, and you're done sort of thing, I'm really excited for this because I think it is a lot easier of an entry point. As, again, someone who has every single Pixel Tactics expansion, like, I love this thing. It is a brick, and again, it had league play, it had draft mode, it had all these different things you could do with all the expansions, but it was just, unless you had people who were showing up every single week to locals and want to play out of this box kit, it was really hard to do anything with it. And I think that's ultimately why they went into a digital product for it as well. And to be perfectly honest, I probably should have looked it up if the digital client is even still alive, but the digital client at least looked good the last time I looked at it, but I just haven't thought about Pixel Tactics for 5 years or however long it's been. But again, special shout out to Level 99. I do love the stuff that they put together. And so with that is kind of the last card, my quick thoughts overall. And again, just, hey, if you like Pixel Tactics and you thought about that before, it's coming back in some ways. So where do we go from here, right? Is this going to be something that is just sticking with the anime and it's only going to be Sandland and, just no LGS support? Is this effectively Bandai's first foray into a more board game style of the market, right? They have arcade games in Japan that blend TCGs and their card games together. Obviously, they have like the 10 different TCGs that they're doing right now. Bandai is an absolutely massive company. For those who have like not actually looked into it, and maybe like One Piece is your first game and you just don't know, which is totally fair. The organization's huge. We have to wait and see kind of where this is going to go, but if this is now going to lend itself well into other IPs where people don't have to spend hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars into TCGs and buying booster boxes, hey, I'm all for it. So we'll see where it goes from there. But I will be going to Gen Con, so, no new video on this until Gen Con, I guess. But hey, I'll be at Gen Con and covering this, at least for the initial launch. I'll buy a display. I'll open it up, talk about the cards, hopefully get a demo game out there eventually that I can put on the channel. But until then, wait for more news. So other than that, we'll see what other stuff comes out. So don't forget, if you're interested and you're not going to be at Gen Con, talk to your LGS, get yourself the decks pre-ordered. I would very strongly recommend buying a display so you at least have 6 different decks, again, assuming equal distribution. Please, Bandai, that's like the one thing you have to do right in this game. If you buy a display, there should be no duplicates in that display. Please, I am begging you, do this right. But with that, hey, we'll wait and see what future information holds for this game. And again, I do look forward to covering it because it does scratch that itch from a game that I really loved in the past, but now is much more beginner friendly that I think could do very well. So with that, my friends, stay safe, stay hydrated, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.